Good. I just did a bunch of therapy. I let people smoke and drink in my therapy stream. So, if you all want to do that, you just come to my therapy stream, which is just 2 ways because of HIPAA. So nobody can see you do it. Yep.
Oh my God. Is it boxers or skirt? Is super cute, Ruby. Are those, is that a skirt or boxers? They're super cute.
These are men's boxers with Santa Clauses.
Oh my God. You know what? I thought about putting on something like red to be festive, and I didn't have time. I actually have to go back to work after this. So. Reason stops for no one.
So Carice, I saw that you're a therapist.
Yes, I am.
You're a therapist. Yep. And Jamie?
I'm from Worldbuilders. I'm an outreach coordinator.
Okay.
Just kind of a obscure title, but I have a background in geek charity, essentially, is my forte. Yeah.
I love the background in your house.
Thank you.
Pretty cool. And then I know Minx and Ron do everything.
You do everything.
I don't know. You say hello.
Hi, I'm the assistant director at Worldbuilders. I'm essentially just going to introduce you guys and then disappear because I'm like the person that hosts After Dark. But it's great to see everybody. I'm pretty pumped about this chat. I think it'll be interesting for a lot of people.
So are the questions going to be audio, video, or is there a chat we should be following?
You don't have to. Oh, sorry, Jamie.
Oh, yeah. You can go ahead, Zay.
Oh, I was just going to say, we do have a chat. If you open up Worldbuilders or twitch.tv/Worldbuilders, you do not have to follow it. Please don't feel responsible in any way. We're in there and we talk to our community. Everyone is super nice. And we also have moderators. So anybody who types anything like offensive or anything like that will be moderated away. But yeah, please feel free to interact in the chat if you'd like to. But also please be mindful that keyboards can pick up on your mics pretty easily. So sometimes it's like, that's we're all talking.
So is this going to be a free flow? Are we going to have questions posed to us? How is this going to work?
Yeah, I'll be asking, we'll do a quick round of introductions, quick, my experience, or not my experience with poly, but like what poly is to me. And then there's kind of a couple of like seed questions, but I have a feeling that between chat questions and kind of the natural flow of conversation will naturally bring up specific topics, but I have some here just in case the conversation lulls. So a little bit of a hybrid of questions and free form. We'll see how the chat.
Yeah. I'd encourage everyone to just treat it like a conversation.
Apparently chat can hear us, so.
for our end of year campaign. Currently,
now
we're
we
over.
can't hear. Hold on.
What? Okay, well.
Yes, audio's fixed. Okay.
Such a
Rewind.
nice intro going. All right, well, scratch that. But yeah, this is a late night panel. Welcome to Worldbuilders After Dark. I'm not reading off a script. We're over 300,000 at this point. So thank you to everyone. We have a goal of 500,000. We're so close. But yeah, we have an awesome guest list joining us today for a polyamory chat. Please excuse me if I keep looking back and forth. I forgot to put the script up here, so I won't be making eye contact with you. It doesn't matter. I won't be here that long. Joining us tonight, we have some esteemed guests, though. I'm actually really excited, you guys. We have Ruby Johnson, specializing in clinical social work and therapy, helps clients with intimacy, infidelity, exploration, and all things sex education. I hope that you feel that is an appropriate introduction to you. Welcome, Ruby.
That works.
We have Carice Ratak Beard, and please let me know if I mispronounced your name. I should have asked before this.
You got it. It's a tough one. You got it.
Sex and relationship therapist, empowering individuals to increase their ability to be resilient and prepare for inevitable life changes. And then we also have podcasters Cunning Minx and Lusty Guy from Polyamory Weekly. Welcome, guys. Self-proclaimed 40 years of positive poly experiences and horrendous poly mistakes between them. They each teach and speak globally on polyamory, relationship, and communication and BDSM. You can find out more from them on polyamoryweekly.com. They also have podcasts readily available on Apple and Google Podcast. Thank you for being here, everybody. Lastly, we have Jamie, our wonderful and inquisitive moderator. I wrote that. Thank you. I will hand you the reins, Jamie. But don't forget to donate, to fundraise.worldbuilders.org/2020. I will drop a link in the chat and I'll be in there with y'all.
Woohoo! Thank you, Zay.
Thanks, y'all.
Everybody for being
Thank you.
here. Wonderful, esteemed guests. It's exciting. This is not a topic that I think is often brought up, especially for maybe like a charity fundraiser. But I think it's something that's fits right into our something to look forward to and our kind of looking on the bright side of life theme for our fundraiser this year. So definitely check out in the chat. We've got everybody's links for Twitters and all that good stuff. But thank you guys, everybody, for being here. We're going to actually start with also letting everybody, we're going to go around and sort of introduce ourselves in our perspective on poly, how we define it or how we see it, just in a quick sentence or two. And we're going to start to my right with Minx. Is it all right if I call you Minx for short?
You can absolutely call me Minx.
Well, Minx, how do you see poly?
I used to define poly as lifestyle of appreciating long-term loving committed relationships with the full knowledge and consent of all parties involved. However, I'm removing long-term from that because plenty of people enjoy polycomics and short-term relationships. And so I just have to remove that from the memorized sentence in my brain.
Absolutely. But that's a great, we'll probably come back to that in sort of the evolution of how you've seen poly over the years. Definitely come back to that as a topic. Lusty Guy.
Well, I guess I'll start off by demonstrating how I tend to be a jerk about these things and say that I don't define poly. I leave that up to whoever calls themselves poly, and I don't argue about it. And I don't actually self-identify as poly so much anymore as ethically non-monogamous. And I understand that that's defining oneself in a negative. But as soon as you say ethically non-monogamous, everybody does just what you all did. Yeah, I get it. And then you say poly, everybody says, what's that? How do you define it? Is it true love? Do you have true love? Is it all about the sex? It can't all be about the sex. And so I just like to sidestep. Yeah, I just sidestep all that stuff and say I'm ethically non-monogamous.
It is less work.
And I am inherently lazy. It's true.
Excellent. Ruby.
So for me, my definition has evolved, especially during COVID. It has definitely evolved. So right now, my working definition is the possibility of multiple simultaneous relationships that are platonic, romantic, and or committed, where everyone is a consent and everyone is aware. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Increase.
Well, how do I define it? As a therapist, my job is helping other people define it for themselves. I personally came to be kind of in this particular niche in the field in a mix of both personal experience and also just, I frankly, think that working with non-monogamy and these like complex dynamics as a therapist is more exciting for me. I find that, I've done a lot of teaching on jealousy specifically and how we shouldn't be afraid of it and how that can be a really good indicator of like our red flags of where we need to heal. So I fucking love sitting down with people going, oh, what are all these feelings that you're feeling? And so I think that, I can't define it as much as I appreciate both the ability to just normalize for folks whatever works for them and empower them, but also I appreciate the work that it brings up to do within yourself, because you can't really let shit slide when you're feeling all these things at one time. So as a therapist, I'm sure, Ruby, you probably understand that too.
Yeah, I do.
Just like,
and
this is
I
good
just
work.
want to take this moment to thank you, Carice, for breaking the cussing barrier.
Oh, I'll be always the first person to do that. All my
I
clients.
am so fucking excited now.
We are to clarify. This is the After Dark show. We've got beverages on deck. We've got swears on deck.
Yep. You have to do that when you talk about feelings. That's what I've learned.
Thank you. Thank
For
you.
sure.
You're welcome.
And so I think we actually touched on what I've experienced as like the two first big questions people have about polyamory is, so is it like polygamy? So what does it look like? And then don't you get jealous? Anybody want to chime in on either of those out of the gate? Because I think, at least for me, and you guys can say, oh, those totally aren't my first questions that people ask me, but in my experience, that's what people have kind of reacted with.
When I hear the "don't you get jealous" line anymore, what I usually say is, and monogamy is immunity to jealousy. Monogamous folk never feel jealousy. Is that how that works? I don't think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's not a guarantee that you won't feel that just to be monogamous. That's so true.
Yep.
Same, I let people know it's a human emotion. It's a human state of mind. I mean, jealousy, the threat of something is going to take something from you. I said it's about anxiety. It's about fear, and it's not to avoid having it. It's just, how do you manage it?
I love that we're all skipping over the first question.
I know, it's just like,
You know what, though? I don't get that one so much anymore.
I don't either.
I did at first.
Polygamy.
Oh, polygamy.
Yeah. I used to get that a lot. Like 15 years ago, I got that a lot. Also, what's the difference between you and swingers? And I don't get that so much anymore. I think we finally done enough. There's been enough polyamory and consensual non-monogamy in pop culture that people don't tend to ask that anymore. I think that people, I'm trying to remember the last person who asked me about polygamy. It was actually a coworker I came out to a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe a little sheltered. But
was that also around the time when that Sister Wives show came out? Because things really got lit when like people started, oh, is this that? Do you work with that kind of thing? And I'm like, well, no, I mean, it's different. That show was a hot mess, but no, that's not what it was.
Yeah, I only watched a couple of episodes.
That's enough.
Did we even get through one? I think we felt like we should watch it because, it was our responsibility.
Dude, I lived in Chicago and hadn't met you when Sister
What was
Wives
the one
came
we
out.
tried? No, it wasn't Sister. What was one we tried to watch? We're like, we should watch this. I'm telling you, it was the blonde guy and the three wives and they're all Mormons. Yeah.
I think there's more than one culture.
I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I watched it with Leon and Marianne in Chicago because I didn't have HBO or Showtime or whatever it was.
Damn that memory loss.
Also, we're old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that's a really great point that you brought up, that it's not so much the case anymore. When I say it's my experience, I mostly mean with like my aunt and like my family who's maybe not so much in like the geek community especially, but I know some of my first exposures, sort of casual exposures to the idea of polyamory or ethical non-monogamy came from fantasy or sci-fi worlds. Do you guys have like experiences that are either your favorites or not so great ones that maybe less from the reality TV side of things, but in like the fantasy sci-fi world that you love or hate?
Well, this might get me burned at the stake, but I will say I can't stand Heinlein. Everybody will say, "Oh, you know, I first heard about poly or non-monogamy or whatever when I read Stranger in a Strange Land, and Robert Heinlein's the best." And yeah,
5 points.
yeah, I can't stand Heinlein. I think he's sexist and militarist. I've never liked him, and it's great if that's what turns you on to it. I don't want to yuck your yum. That's cool,
Sure.
But yeah, not a fan of Heinlein. On the other hand, I'm the guy that never got turned on to the idea. I just always knew. I lost my virginity in a triad when I was far too young. And, you know, the only time I ever even tried monogamy was for a brief period with Elle, people who listen to the show will know it was my wife. And for about a year after we'd been together for 5 or 6, we tried to be monogamous. And it was just an unending series of me coming home crying, confessing to an affair. And after 3 or 4 hookups, we both said, okay, time out. This ain't working.
Yeah.
So, you know, other people have other things, but I hate Heinlein, and no, never came to it from fiction.
Yeah.
I think I didn't come to it from sci-fi, but definitely I find that I used to go to a lot of science fiction conventions. I love cosplay. Any chance to dress up as Inara from Firefly, I'm in. And I just found that you didn't get these 101 questions of, you know, what is polyamory and don't you get jealous? I think, and I've been asked a lot of times, like, what's the connection between geekdom, basically, and polyamory? And I think it's that, you know, if you read or watch a lot of speculative fiction, you've already asked these questions. What if? What if society weren't the way it is? And one of those what ifs can be something like polyamory. And so I find that it tends to be a lot more accepted and a lot more common. In fact, I used to teach like way early on, I taught a top 5 places to meet poly people. And one of them was definitely at science fiction conventions. Now I warned that not everybody there is going to be poly, but you're going to have a bigger percentage, and you also have a percentage of folks that are poly for the con. So if you want to have So if you want to have a little hookup at the con in costume, then yeah, that can happen.
Right.
For sure.
You know, for on my end, in the circles that I travel, it has over the last 3 or 4 years, I guess maybe 5, it's become more mainstream. You know, from shows like Insecure, Love and Hip Hop. You know, those particular shows. You know, Jada Pinkett and Will Smith. You know, they finally opened up, right? And so, what I find with my clients when they come into my office is that they have this particular exposure, but also they're doing a whole lot of independent research before they get there. And so they come in with an ideal of what they think is going to look like based upon the TV shows. And those have to be debunked, right? But, you know, the exposure is from pop culture, which I'm really stoked about. I use the word stoked. I'm so old. And
I'm right there with you.
which I'm really excited about, because it is becoming so mainstream that it's not an unfamiliar term for many people anymore, you know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel a little fraud complex right now because I would consider myself geek adjacent and not necessarily, like, I'm a member of a lot of communities that overlap. You know, like before COVID, I, you know, taught and led a burlesque troupe, which ended up overlapping with fire community, you know, all these Venn diagrams that could very much just be the spirograph at that point. But I'm with you, Ruby, that people come in certainly with their own muses of what this is supposed to look like. And I came to know about it through the queer community. I'm a Baptist preacher's daughter who is now a queer sex therapist working with polyamory and kink and all of these things. So I have, you know, swung the gamut of a lot of experiences. But I came to it from the queer community in this place where, kind of like you were saying, Minx, like, we're really pushing boundaries and we're saying, like, well, what if what I want doesn't fit into this exact, rubric of what I'm supposed to want, and how can I redefine that? And so that's a blessing and a curse sometimes, people coming in with some awareness, but also realizing like the rule of therapy is anything can be different for each person, right? So how you define it or how you feel is going to be different than your neighbor or their neighbor or whoever else is doing it. And I think we set up standards that way, which again, good or bad, in between. Right?
Oh, I'm gonna say I think that's good. One of the and by that I mean the do-it-yourself nature, not only of polyamory but of life in general. One of the martial arts I've studied for many years from the Philippines, they're saying all the time, not wrong, different. Just because it's different don't mean it's wrong. As a matter of fact, it might be really right. And because everybody, when they come into this non-monogamous space, has to set aside the gift-wrapped package of expectations of behavior that we're given in a monogamous space, that is a bit of a curse and it can be daunting, but it's also a really great opportunity to build the thing that works exactly for you. And it's because of that I resist making definitions. I will accept that anybody who puts a definition that it has to involve consent, that everybody has to know when consent was going on, otherwise it's cheating. I'm not going to argue with that. Sure, absolutely. But having said that, once you get past the consent issue, which is true for more than just our relationships, I'll put in, I'm okay with whatever answer somebody comes up to for this is how my poly works best for me. And I really want to be careful not to ever tell somebody, oh, you're not really experiencing true love. It's too short term. You're not invested enough. It's not kitchen table poly. You're just, I don't care. It's a feature that you get to define it for yourself, not a bug.
I always, what irks me, Ron, is when people say, you're not good at poly. I don't even know what that means. When you're not good at poly, I'm like, I thought I left the holy grail world when I shift my paradigm to non-monogamy or polyamory, because there was this standard of what good at something looks like, this ideal of what it was supposed to be, and the liberation. Because when I walked into the polyamorous world, I also found kink. So it was some sexual liberation that was happening for me, and so to have constraints of what is supposed to look like actually was counterintuitive to my liberating moment that I was having. And that's what I find with a lot of people, not just clients, but just in people I hang out with. It's consistent evolution and liberation just because one is practicing these love styles that allow for creativity and imagination.
Absolutely.
I find that that's another thing I said, another place to find poly people is there's a lot of overlap between kink and poly. And I think part of that is because if you have kinks are specific. And it doesn't, and I think kinksters are more likely to understand that just because your partner isn't into this particular kink doesn't mean you have to break up, right? So you can have a partner that is just for the spanking with baloney at sunset dressed as Barney the dinosaur kink. And then
you're not supposed to tell anybody. God damn it. No, I didn't consider that.
I don't do pork products, so it can be somebody else. But yeah, I think there's an understanding that you can love someone and not have them be your everything, and have other people that are your kink partners for your Barney baloney spanking, or frankly for something as mundane as like bowling. Like if your partner doesn't have to be into everything that you're into. In fact, I personally find that rather unhealthy and weird if they are. I shouldn't say that. I've had a glass of wine. But I think
our therapists might be able to chime in on how healthy our therapists might be able to chime in from that perspective of like, in a relationship, having outlets, not depending on one person for everything.
Oh man. I mean, let me tell you what COVID has done to, relationships, like cohabiting partnerships. It's, as a sex therapist, we're asked, to essentially keep the spark alive. And yet we have these scenarios where we're literally trapped in the house. We're expecting one person to be our entire village. And no matter what your relationship model is, that's good for a few people. It's really hard for a lot of other people. So no matter how my clients identify in my relationships I work in, I'm always telling them, I need you to farm shit out. I need you to, like, if you get this from this other person, you know, like, go to your best friend instead of your partner for some things, because we are used to and we are kind of made to live in the village model, regardless of what you do with your relationship model, right? That has to be a thread through everything. I don't know if you feel that way, Ruby, but you can tell when people are like just staring at each other, asking them to be everything, and then they get pissed that they're not everything to each other. It's a recipe for a lot of implosion in relationships.
Right. I mean, I'm finding it in monogamous or non-monogamous relationships, or, you know, lifestyle relationships, is that the usual social outlets, which is the big piece of it, the social outlets that people are saying that my one and only needs to be my best friend, my activity partner, my
Mhm.
my my, my sexual prowess, my all of this bullshit, right? You got all this
Mhm.
pressure that is put on top of the relationship, and it has exacerbated, you know,
Mhm.
it since COVID, and it's gotten really, really sketchy for a lot of people. And when I say sketchy, which is that people are doing some unhealthy, risky things
Yes.
in the name of let me reach out and let me do that. But that's a whole nother conversation, you know.
Mhm.
But the idea of someone being your everything, I have to break that down for people, because people
Mhm.
get really, really scared when you think, okay, so what happens if she's with this person and this person does this better than I do? We used to do that together, all of these types of conversations. So the angle that I come at it from is that we don't have to compete. You know,
Right.
relationships are not about competition. You know, it's, you know, if you want to have a friend or you want to have someone, if you're in a non-monogamous or monogamous relationship, but we're focusing on polyamory, if you want to have that, you have to recognize that this is not a competition for someone's time, someone's joy, someone's happiness. You know, this is about actually how can you grow, how can you be fulfilled, and you learn and you're fulfilled by having multiple people within your life where
Mhm.
you're
I want to
learning
actually
from.
touch on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead.
done.
Oh.
I can go on forever.
I thought you were. Well, no,
Same.
I think you hit on a really important point there adjacent to this, which is that people will oftentimes do the unmet need add lover poly model, which is to say, I don't have anybody to bowl. I need to find someone to bowl. And so that's why I'm poly, because I can find somebody that doesn't. And that's fine and dandy. But the issue with it for me is that it defines one's inner self by one's outer partners, right? For me, to be non-monogamous is all about actually not because I need to find other people who can do other things and fill other needs. It's because I need to fulfill my need to be honest with myself. Really, if I'm not living in a non-monogamous way, I'm trying to live a lie. And that just means I crash and burn in a big flaming ball of ick really quick. So, yeah, it's true that one of the features, again, of non-monogamy is that you can share life interests with other lovers. But it's also true that that's a feature of most relationship models outside the sexual field, right? Nobody puts any expectation on any given friend that that friend will supply all your friendship needs. There's no set of parents that have one child and expect that one child to fulfill all their childhood, parenting needs. We don't have one cousin and say, we're done. I don't need any more cousins, right?
Mhm.
It's just a fallout of this possessiveness because there's some sexuality involved. But the important thing that I wanted to tease out and build off of from Ruby was that there's an outwards facing idea of it, but there's also an inwards facing, that non-monogamy needs to address the person that is doing it because of who they are and what they are, I think. Otherwise, they're going to be swimming upstream in the same way that when somebody who is naturally monogamous and more inclined towards that behavior tries to be non-monogamous because they think they're more enlightened. It's not going to work. You're not more enlightened.
Right.
The trick is not picking from A, B, or C the right option. The trick is finding the right mix of oneself and A, B, or C that works right. And I think sometimes when we talk about this, I need this and my lover doesn't do it, so I found another lover, we can fall into defining it and looking at it from the outside effects instead of thinking about it from the core. Make sense?
Yeah, that's been called the Frankenpartner.
Frankenpartner.
Right.
Yes.
Like I'll put together this jigsaw puzzle of partners
Yeah, that's
to
right,
fill all
Dora.
my needs.
That's a great
poly
term.
or
And-
piecemeal poly. they call it.
Exactly. And I want to point out too, just on a much less philosophical level, that, you know, if you go and have fun with another partner, there are benefits to your existing partner, right? So I thought that's what I thought you were going to talk about. We call it blowback. So for example, I'm really into breath play. And so Lusty Guy and I would do some choking pretty much all the time. Pretty much all the time. We always have a little bit of choking in there, right? Just like you do. And he has another partner that, you know, he would have sex with, and he would talk about it. And she's like, oh, you know what? Let's maybe try that a little bit. And so he ended up having my kink transfer over to another partner, and it enhanced that experience. So that's the thing about having, you know, not just relationships, but, you know, sex with other partners, is that you can learn more and you can bring that back to existing relationships and enhance them, which is really fun.
I had a sign made up one year that lit up and flashed that was across my shoulders on my back, and I wore it to Burning Man that said, I taught your girlfriend / wife that trick you like. It was fun.
That's awesome.
I think there's a lot though, you know, even so when we're talking about the Venn diagrams, I think that's a really great visual to bring for people, because it's absolutely true. There's a lot of crossover with kink and poly, and with geekdom and poly, and like Burning Man and poly. There's all sorts of different communities and intersections that come along with poly. But like being poly doesn't mean you're kinky particularly. But that principle still applies, where, you know, you might learn a communication trick with another partner that you then bring, you know, you've internalized and said, okay, now I feel like I'm a better communicator across all of my partnerships. I think that learning process is really important. Ruby, Chris, what do you guys find to be like the best? I don't want to say, I mean, it's a kind of a trick question, but how do you help people get to sort of that learning space?
I mean, the first thing I was just going to jump on was like, I've been just sitting back and watching how the world is operating and going, you know who figured out how to do contact tracing a long time ago? That people in the non-monogamy circle, because they're gonna be like, okay, who touched you at what point, and when do we all get tested, and how do we protect that fluid bond? And, you know, I think there has been some skills learned that apply in other areas, some like communal blowback, to put Mink's term into like public health, right? Like,
yeah,
we're learning to do this. How do we get to that learning space? My approach is different than a lot of people's. I approach the therapy space unafraid of any emotions that anyone is bringing me. I love when people are really angry, because that's data. I love when people are really jealous, because that's data. I come from a really humanistic perspective, meaning I believe that whatever originates in our bodies in terms of emotion is like intended for good, even if it gets skewed and kind of fucked up and projected in these other ways. So if I can encourage people to, you know, not see themselves as failures because they feel, and going back to what you were saying, Ruby, is like people asking themselves, am I bad at poly? Usually I've seen that means people think that you're supposed to sort of ascend to some poly nirvana where you feel nothing. And like, that's not possible. You know, I have a complicated relationship as a therapist with the word compersion, because I love what it stands for. I hate when it becomes the standard, when that's something that everyone thinks they have to achieve perfectly in order to be good at this, when really it's about how are we looking at the negative feelings as indicators? How are we looking at our successes? Some shit's harder than you thought it would be. Some is easier than you thought it would be. You know, when we can get into that radical acceptance of like, whatever my body is telling me is just, it's the roadmap. It's where I need to go with things, which I know harkens back to my first point, but I'm mostly just getting people to like take it easy on themselves, quite honestly. Like, you're doing a good enough job. Whatever you're doing is okay. Let's make sure you're not hurting people with it, right? But if you're feeling insecure, that's okay. If you're feeling jealous, that's okay. If you're not as good as Susie Q over here, that's okay. It's all okay. It's still good, right? You're still enough.
Absolutely.
Which I know is like stitch it on a pillow. There's no right. There's no design. Exactly.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, I'm not a therapist by any means, but I find that a lot of people write me and for help with their poly issues. And I really think that we, and I include myself in that, tend to get ourselves kind of bundled up in a knot when something's not going well. And we are less likely to give ourselves credit when things are going well. So one of the things that Lusty Guy taught me is to do a relationship check-in on a regular basis. We do this once a week on our date night. We just say, how are things going? And this is a chance for me to say, you know, what's going well, and then bring up something negative before it becomes a big issue, right? And it's a really good practice to get into, to give yourself and your partner props when things are going well. Hey, you know, we had that issue this week, and I felt that even though it was unpleasant, we handled it really well. It was over in a day. Nobody ended up crying. That was really good compared to, you know, if the same issue had come up a year ago. I just think we don't always give ourselves props for doing things well, and we get tied up in knots when things, you know, when we're upset about something.
Yeah, comparing you to you.
I want to jump back to something that you said, and something that Ruby mentioned earlier about not being good at poly, and the notion of compersion. Compersion is held up as this fucking, I can say that, this fucking holy grail.
I already did it. You can do it.
Yeah, we're in now. Thank you for breaking the ice. It's held up as this fucking holy grail, as this, you must have an orgasm when your partner goes out on a date with somebody, or you're not truly poly. Fuck that shit, first of all.
Can we super quick, I don't know that many people in chat might know what compersion is, but does anybody want to do a quick definition of that term?
I'll give you mine, which is a little different, which is compersion is the joy induced when you see joy in others. So when a dog runs, you smile, that's compersion. It doesn't have to be this, oh, I feel a sexual arousal when my partner is sexually aroused and engaged with somebody else. No. And I think that people in the poly community tend to define it very wrongly when they talk about it as the opposite of jealousy, which is the colloquial term that gets heard all the time. And
that is a definition you'll hear a lot, is compersion is the opposite of jealousy. And
which is, no, it's not. Compersion is joy. You know, if when a baby laughs, you got to laugh with them, that's compersion. You shouldn't feel bad because you don't get a sexual charge out of your partner going off and getting a sexual charge with somebody else and saying that you're bad poly, because that doesn't happen for you. I can't do compersion. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. Compersion is joy induced in others' joy. It's not the opposite of jealousy.
I actually specify, in my definition, that it is non-sexual. It is the non-sexual joy you experience in seeing your partner happy. And it's the same as the joy you see when you see your friend happy, when they win their soccer match and you're happy for them. Your partner goes on a date and you're happy for them.
Yeah. Yeah, so in chat, someone says, is compersion good or bad? And that's kind of what we're talking about. It's not really either. Kitty. It is a concept that I think is pretty misunderstood and sometimes held as like an expectation, and maybe even ill-defined, I would call it. But like Cunningmings and Lusty Guy were saying, compersion in kind of an ideal sense is feeling happiness when you see someone you love happy. That's sort of a general sense of the concept, and people take it in a lot of different directions, so it can be kind of a controversial idea.
Yeah, and I would say probably from what I said, you know, I have a complicated relationship with it. as not just as a therapist, but as a person who's experienced the highs and lows of that. Because I was, I was raised in the church, and I was raised in this like, kind of fear-based sexuality. So for me, it was an indicator of like, there may be ascensions that I will never ascend to because of some of my early programming. And so for me, I can say this is in concept a good thing. That word is good. Joy is good. Shared joy is good. Selfless joy is good. But as a standard of behavior or a thing that I must be in order to be valid, then it's not super great, right? Then it turns into something power shifty, not in the fun way that we don't want to mess with, right? That's what I mean by complicated relationships with it.
For sure.
Yeah.
And again, tying back, it ties in a lot with people's conversations about jealousy, and sort of the idea that one is the opposite of the other. And I personally think that learning to sit with and understand feelings of jealousy is something that everybody of every relationship type, and including single, learning to sort of sit with your jealousy is really important. Do you guys have tips for that, or particular strategies you recommend for people who are feeling jealous in any context?
Ruby, you looked like you really wanted to say something.
Yeah,
about
Ruby got kind of like a like ears perked up.
To me, jealousy is there's a great book called Love's Refraction, and it's by Gillian Derry. And in that book, she actually it's a book on jealousy and compersion, and she actually breaks all of it down. It was her dissertation, and she turned it into a book, and to me it's the number one book that I go to. And in the way of jealousy, I actually ask the client, or I ask myself when I get jealous, what is really going on, Ruby? Are you feeling displaced? Are you feeling like you're not having access to someone? Is someone not responding to you? Do you feel this girl got a bigger ass than you do, bigger titties? What's really going on? And is it envy or is it jealousy? And so for me, the best way to manage jealousy is to check within yourself first and find out what is going on, and actually have some grounding exercises, all of the anxiety and all of the angst that pops up as a result of jealousy. But the real deal is to figure out, where is it that you're feeling threatened that someone is going to take something from you? And those are that one question to kind of dance around. I encourage people when they're new and trying this out and they're in long-term relationships, I say buy 3 journals. One is when you feel like you don't have access to your partner. One is when you feel like your partner's not responding to you. and one when you feel like you are emotionally deprived of something. And I do it in a jokingly way, but I'm like basically saying journaling is going to be your friend, because when you start to look at what unlocks for you when you're first starting out in polyamory, you start to have a whole lot of questions, because there are a whole lot of things that were buried and a lot of insecurities that pop up. Everything that was buried, when you shift a relationship paradigm to where monogamy is about locking you down and protecting the relationship from others and not allowing anyone in, and then you're shifting into a relationship model that wants you to open up, it's going to bring in new insecurities and new things that pop up. There's another great book called Rewriting the Rules by Meg John Barker, and within that book they actually discuss non-monogamy and how that shift in itself creates jealousy. It talks about redefining commitment, redefining what conflict looks like, and all of this redefining. And so the conversation around jealousy is not just about a feel. It's a very complex conversation to have. and I attempt to keep it simple, but it's not a simple conversation to have. I don't know.
No, and it shouldn't be, right? Like it's a opportunity to, like you said, kind of look at all of these insecurities and figure out where the threats are. I also, like the driven Taurus that I am, I like to master things that I'm struggling with by like externalizing them. And so I created a workshop called Unlearning Jealousy at a time when I was really, really struggling with it, because I thought if I can just like cerebral get it and teach it, then I'll figure it out for myself. And what came from that,
raise your hand if you feel guilty of that.
Yep, here I am admitting this. I'm like, please trust me with your mental health. But like one of the reasons I chose to go into specifically jealousy is because it's a thing that we are so afraid of. It's also this thing that if wielded without caution, it's a thing that justifies really fucked up behavior, like the woman who, or the man who, or anyone who slashes their lover's tires because of jealousy. It's like, oh, well, this was a crime of passion, so it's fine. It like justifies all of these things, where if we are able to like sit with it, and a lot of the work that I pull from, and I don't know, Ruby, if you know this, if you do this too, but there's like what I call like basement level and then top shelf emotions, which is pulled from Daniel Siegel's work on learning the different layers of threats as it relates to attachment. Most of my couples or anyone who is in there dealing with jealousy, if I say, okay, if jealousy makes you want to like be outward with it, if you can stave off that reaction, if you can just sort of wait long enough to get at what's underneath that, usually are those fears of abandonment. Usually there are those fears of this person is going to replace me. This person is going to be better than me. And then like kind of the rude therapist that I am, I don't soothe people's fears around not being abandoned or not being replaced, because the reality is relationships end, right? That is a truth that happens. We get things and we lose things. That is the ebb and flow of life. So then my job is to make them more comfortable and safer when things are retracting. Like when everybody's having a lot of sex and orgasms and love, it feels great. When there's breakups and things that are happening, everyone's like, wait, why did I do this? This is terrible. It's like we need to be good at both of them. We can't just be good at inhaling and not exhaling. We have to be good at both of those things. And jealousy is the window.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, there are a lot of people now teaching classes about how to break up. Of course, it's always in poly conferences, because that's really hard, especially because the poly communities tend to be pretty small. And so you're all going to end up dating each other at some point.
It's very incestuous.
I just have to jump in and say, it's always been a pet peeve of mine that jealousy is treated like some big unsurmountable thing. Like we have thousands of emotions, but this one is like, oh, we're completely helpless. As you say, Carice, crime of passion. Oh, that's okay. You were jealous.
Makes for good country music.
We don't get to say, oh, you were mad, so therefore it's okay that you went out and killed someone. No, that's not okay. Oh, and here's the dog.
Gotta have both.
And it really bugs me that we give jealousy so much power over us, sort of as a culture. And it's really just, I mean, I'm not saying it's a pleasant emotion. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but we deal with much greater emotions all the time. We deal with depressions. We deal with anger. We deal with insecurity. Drop it.
Disobedient dogs.
We deal with disobedient dogs. And, I think we inflate it beyond really what its power actually is.
Yep.
Ruby, you were going to say something.
Oh, no. You said it. I was like, Ruby, you don't need to repeat that.
One of the things that comes up all the time in the monogamous community is how to deal with the feelings of jealousy that specifically surround when one's partner is with someone else.
That's what I was going to say, but you said
with somebody else. And we have a little 3-part mnemonic that we do to specifically address that situation: discuss, distract, and do. So the discussion phase is before the date, when you and your partners talk about all of these things that you guys are talking about, when you get down to the roots of the insecurities, you face into your feelings, you sit with your feelings, and you talk about them, and you ask all the questions you have, because ignorance will breed monsters. If you don't know what's going on, your imagination may very well tell you what's going on, and it may not be right. So you discuss. Then during the actual event, you distract. There's nothing wrong with some good distraction. Do something that's good for you that you would not normally do with that partner. So if they don't, for example, it's really hard for me to keep my mouth shut when she watches bad TV, or what I consider bad TV. So if there's something that you like to watch that your partner is going to sit there and MST3K it and ruin it for you, now is the time to crank that shit up. Yes, enjoy and have some fun. Distract yourself while they're off. When they come back with something, by the way, when I say that, I mean with something that's going to be good for you. Don't distract yourself because you went down to the back alley and had a bunch of anonymous sex and injected a bunch of drugs and did some things that are going to make you feel bad about yourself. Do distractions that are positive for you, that are good expressions of you. And then when after the event, take some time to do each other in whatever way that works for you. It doesn't have to be sexual, although if you're a simple soul like me, it might very well be sexual. That's okay. But it can also be your favorite breakfast and a conversation. It can be watching that show that the two of you love to watch. Whatever it is that signifies to you that you're having some bonding time together, do that. So to be specific, and I hope not to trivialize, but to actually deal with jealousy in the context that a lot of people in the monogamous space would myself when she's out for a date, distract, discuss, do. Now I'm going to look at the dog and let her sit.
Yeah.
Dog is trying to. He's already eaten 2 joints in a Christmas tree ornament, so we have to keep an eye on him. A glass ornament, by the way. And now he's trying to eat the fake greenery. You know what? He's got everything, so I'll leave it to you folks.
I think too, jealousy gives us an opportunity to, kind of the last thing I want to say, I'm sure this will come up again, but usually when I hear people saying a lot of, I don't want you to do this with this person, you can't go here with this person, I will ask them, like, how much of this is you don't want them doing that with another person, and how much of this is you really want them to do that with you? That there's something that you're missing that you had in a past life with them, a past season that you're really missing, that it kind of stings to watch that happen with somebody else. And can we do both? Can they do that? And can we also reinvigorate and find a way to tap back into that for you? Because sometimes we externalize. It's easier to, control what other people do instead of say, I feel really scared that I won't get this thing again,
Yeah, someone in chat actually brought up something that I think is a really interesting challenge for poly people internally to sort of discern, at least I've experienced it, is jealousy versus maybe not trusting or not liking a lot one of your partner's partners. Because you don't have to, at least in the way that I do poly, I don't have to love all my partner's partners. We don't all have to be BFFs in our polycule. But that can feel like jealousy and it can feel like resentment. How do you guys sort of untangle that or recommend untangling it?
Like someone?
What'd you say?
Something like when you don't like someone, and I think that's one of those holy grail things, or that expectation that you're going to love all of your metas. Right. And you're not going to like all of your metas, and if you remove that expectation or the pressure of it, there's so many conversations around that when you just don't click with your meta. And I think removing the expectation is a real simple one, but I'm sure somebody else have some more practical things to offer there.
I always say that I would like, in the event that everybody has to meet and be in my hospital room because I'm in it, that you all can be polite with each other and help to get me better and get out. And that's it. You don't gotta give each other's phone numbers. You don't gotta be buddy. In as much as you want to be great, I'm supportive. But all I really kind of demand is that when I'm in the hospital, everybody can be good with each other and good with me when they got to be in the room with me. And that's about it. I think, again, like Ruby's saying, it's one of those holy grails, this notion that you're not really poly unless you're kitchen sink poly and everybody loves each other equally.
Kitchen table poly.
Oh, kitchen, thank you.
He said kitchen. That was Freudian. Kitchen.
I like kitchen poly though. That means all
It's real
like all of
Freudian
them.
and good.
And it's just another gatekeeping thing. It's just another, holier than thou gatekeeping thing. And there are a lot of people who use the self-ID poly who want to put those gatekeeping behaviors up, and I just don't buy them.
So I'll admit that. Greg can testify to this too, that in the first 5 to maybe 10 years of poly, I really needed to have a good, strong relationship with my metamor. And I think that's okay. I'm not saying everybody has to, but after a terrible, horribly painful breakup, what I came to understand is that is something that I needed. My metamor did not need that and did not want that. And that's okay. It's just good for me to know that where I am, or where I was, I should say, I really need to have a strong relationship with the metamor. For me at that time, I kind of did need to be best friends. And that's okay, but it's not necessarily anything to strive for. It's just what I needed. And it's something that you can just disclose at the beginning of a relationship. Nowadays, I have to say, I really trust Lusty Guy. His taste in women is absolutely exquisite. So if he likes someone, I'm probably going to trust her. So I no longer feel the need for that. But in my first couple of poly relationships, I really needed the best friend. And I don't want to diss anybody who does need that. It's okay. It's just not, don't call it the gold standard, just call it what it is, which is what you need in this relationship right now.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys hear the dog in the background?
Yeah. She got a Kong or something. I can hear it.
Okay. Yeah. He's got
So we've got another question from chat. Is there expectation of privacy versus openness about a partner's partner? And I think that brings up a whole thread of conversations in terms of, transparency and communication and privacy and all of those things. So who wants to jump on it first?
I don't understand the question, I think. Can you explain that question a little more?
So I think what she's asking, in terms of how much do I know about my partner's relationship with their meta?
Okay.
Yeah. How do you manage your desire to know and your meta's desire for privacy? So the prototypical example in the non-monogamous space, you have a meta who tests positive for some STI. Is their right of privacy to withhold their testing status more prevalent than your right to know that there's somebody in the circle who has tested positive for an STI? Which is the paramount consideration, is how I'm reading that question. At a meta level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great response, is to bring that immediately in. There's some things that people there's a need to know level of stuff in poly.
Right. And I am a huge fan of consent. Right. And entitlement. I mean, this is the social justice, Black queer woman shit coming up right now, right? When people can be entitled to your story and entitled to your space and entitled to certain things, So when I work with people, and in my own, let me just speak for my own personal self. Me within relationships, I let people know, there's, when it comes to their life and death, hell yes, please. And that is an understanding that we have up front. Right. And so to me, that there's a difference there that makes it a difference between secrecy and privacy. Right. Knowing what what's going on inside of my house, all of that's privacy for me, and you holding a secret for me is when it's going to jeopardize someone else, and it's in an intent to manipulate or mislead someone. To me, in that particular instance, that would be a secret. But am I entitled to know all of the dirty details of my partner's stuff? No, that's their particular relationship. And I'm also coming from a paradigm of RA and solo polyamory. That's relationship anarchy and solo polyamory. I'm also coming from that lens to where there's not a lot of crossover there, or I don't expect that, and I don't expect anyone else to have that of me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to know yourself well enough to know what you need to know. For me, we have an agreement. We talk about, STIs is the obvious example. I have an autoimmune disorder. If I get what for everybody else would be a minor STI, I'm going to end up in the hospital and I could die. So to me, that's really important, even if you don't think it's a big deal. But there are other things too, like, sexual acts, emotional states. Are you entitled to know if your partner is falling in love with someone? And that's something that is going to be different for everyone.
Exactly.
I personally like to know stuff. We have we don't have any like formal rules, but we do generally go for no surprises. I don't want to be surprised and find out that you suddenly fell in love with someone. So Ron is really good about letting me know, hey, I met this person, I've been flirting with her, could go somewhere. Hey, we had a really good date. Things are happening. And I just like to know. And that's it. I just say, okay, cool, good, have fun. But if I didn't know those things, then I would go into like neurotic, bad state. So it's really important that you personally know what it is that you need to know in order to be happy and healthy.
Yeah, it's damn hard for a partner of yours to fulfill your needs if you don't know what they are. I want to underscore Ruby's point when she said that she fell down on this topic on the side of consent. I am big on consent. I think that all ethics, the roots of them come from consent. But having said that, I will say that biology don't care about consent. And if we take it out of the STI context, and let's make it COVID. You have a COVID bubble, and somebody in that COVID bubble has been exposed to somebody who has COVID. Do you feel you have a right to know? I think most of us would say, you're damn right. Expose me to COVID. Yeah, I want to know that. And that's what I mean when I say that biology is the most compelling factor. Even if that original person who had COVID doesn't want their status revealed and isn't consenting to that, I'm sorry. At that point, the biology trumps. And if you are exposing people to a known pathogen, your desire to be quiet about your pathogenic state, that's a problem. Yeah, I feel for you. I'm sorry. I'll be as gentle as I can. But biology in the final analysis always comes first.
Most people use the not use, but I think it's easier. I find it easier to negotiate really concrete boundaries and agreements when it comes to like STI, fluid bonding stuff, because that's math, right? We can do the math. We can set up the math equation. We can assess the risk and then change the practices based on that. I find it much harder, much harder when we're trying to figure out how much is, a responsible amount to give a fuck about what someone else was doing with their partners, right? And that's where we have to really, the first thing I'm going to do when you're in therapy with me is if you're saying, well, I want to know if he's falling in love with somebody, I'll say, okay, we'll get there. We'll get there of whether or not you guys agree that that's something that you should talk about. But what's the spirit of the ask? Why are you asking? Is this a place of, I just want to know because that helps me not, like you said, things like, I'm not trying to fill in blanks that aren't there. So I need the truth so that I don't mind read the truth. That's fine. If it's a place of, I need to control for all bad things to happen, that's not going to happen, right? That turns really messy really quickly. If it's I love having you in love, right? That's great, right? Then it's okay, that's a fun thing. But I will always hold up the mirror and say, what's the spirit of the ask before we go to should you or should you not report? these things. That's our individual jobs to go, what's the spirit of my ask right now? Is it control? Is it love? Is it fear? What is it?
Or even just with a voyeuristic joy and pleasure. And then that circles back to Ruby's point about consent, right? If I'm with partner A and my meta with them gets a voyeuristic charge about hearing what we have done together, do I get the opportunity to consent before I'm part of those fantasy and plays? Well, I should think.
Yes, that's a big one right there, is sharing sexual acts and activities. Like, I want to hear about your night, but did my other partner consent?
Right.
You're hearing about my night. You know,
Exactly.
that's a real big conversation in the Black and Poly groups consistently, consistently.
So super quick, Ruby, somebody asked in chat for a definition. You mentioned it previously responding to this, of relationship anarchy. Can you tell us what that concept is? I love it. It's one of my absolute favorite terms.
Are you Antifa, Ruby? Is that what that is?
Are you an Antifa?
Are you one of them Antifas?
Snowflake.
The way I define relationship anarchy is real simple. I'm an individual, number one, who is non-territorial, non-possessive, non-hierarchical within my relationships. And I am someone who doesn't necessarily require to have a crossover of relationships. This is what it looks like for me. Each relationship is standalone on itself, is very egalitarian. And so for me, that's the simple definition that is crystal clear for people to understand. And if I want to add solo polyamory, within it, I would say I'm my own primary person. I don't necessarily need a nesting person or something like that. But since COVID, I've been dancing between solo polyamory and RA, just because of connection, for connection reasons. So that's a whole nother conversation.
For sure. And there's a lot of different terms. I mean, I think we can agree that there's kind of a multi-dimensional spectrum of sort of the relationship anarchy side, where it's low expectations, and then maybe what we've been calling kind of the kitchen table polyamory, where everybody's very invested and conversational and connected. There's all sorts of different ways to do poly, and I think that is an important takeaway for anybody watching. So our last question, if anybody has last questions in chat, get them in quickly. But I actually think we'll wrap up, because Gray, your question is complicated. Before we wrap up, do you guys have any projects you'd like to talk about that you're working on, or resources that you feel strongly to point people towards? Let's start with Cunning Minx and Lusty Guy.
Oh, this is hard. I'm a podcaster who hasn't produced a podcast for 8 months.
It's a pandemic.
COVID and relationship issues, and the puppy taking up a lot of energy, basically. So I'm just working on our comeback episode. Basically, we recorded it twice. It hasn't worked out. Hoping the third time tomorrow will be the charm, when we get a dog walker, so we can actually sit down and record quietly.
Fingers crossed. But if I may interject, there's lots of good content that you have already made, even before the 8 months, that people can go check out. So definitely check out the link in chat for that podcast. Ruby.
Well, I just finished my conference, Poly Dallas Millennium. We had our 5th anniversary on November 6th through the 8th. I have a couple of books that I'm writing and coming out, and doing a couple of other projects, but Poly Dallas Millennium is my main gig. So that's what it's doing.
Check it out, everybody. And Carice.
I think when you said that, Minx, like, I haven't done anything in 8 months, like, I've felt that, but I realized that, like, just autopilot is an achievement right now based on what we could be doing. And so I'm going to follow my own advice and say, like, I've put some projects on hold so that I can, take care of my clients, take care of myself, take care of my wife, take care of my son, take care of our community. And that's what I'm working on. When, the tide shifts, I'm writing a book on the recovery of spiritual abuse and sexuality. So that'll be coming out. I'm naming it out loud so that I just fucking do it eventually, but I'm also being very gentle with just survive, y'all, and be gentle on yourselves and just get through this.
Absolutely. Yep. For sure. Well, thank you everyone so much. It was great having all of you to chat. It's really been an honor. Thank you to everybody who's hung out in chat and had questions. And as a reminder, all of this is for charity. This great conversation we just had, this panel, the VOD will be on YouTube. And right now we're doing our end of year fundraiser for Heifer International. So if you can contribute, if you can't contribute, that's totally fine. Share it with your friends. Go follow our awesome panelists. And thank you all so, so much for being here. I think Zay might be popping in to wrap up. We'll see. Maybe we'll just cut. There she is.
Hey guys, thank you everyone for joining us. Jamie pretty much said it all. To our guests, you should be, I think, super impressed with yourselves, because our chat is usually just inside jokes and yelling and having a good time. But we had a full amount of guests here, and everyone was quiet and content just listening to the chat. And it's a rare occasion. So
we're polite.
It felt like an attentive crowd for sure.
Yeah, it was a very interesting panel. I have to say, I'm a bi person in a monogamous heterosexual relationship, and I enjoyed this chat you guys had so much. It was knowledgeable, and I think that there were a lot of things that you can apply no matter what your relationship looks like. So it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Zay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
And give.
Yes.
I don't know if we Viva Moose out on this, but Viva Moose!
Viva Moose! Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Bye. Do we just log off now?
You can hold just a second, because
Okay.
we'll make sure.